Hey everybody, I am Michael O'Neill. Welcome to my driveway pseudo gym, where today we will be learning the air squat with my beautiful assistant Megan and my highly average looking assistant Reese. So we're working with these two athletes today, trying to coach a movement that is great because it is a basic human function. It is a functional movement that translates to a multitude of other movements that we can do. But before we get into the movement sequence itself, we're going to do a slight warm-up, try to open up our hips. So if y'all will, drop down on one knee. And we're going to put our front foot out, hand on that to pin it down. And what we're going to do is come forward in the hip flexion and try to let that knee just fall out. Coming into that squat archetype with one leg to encourage that feet straight, knees out position. Really try to oscillate around there, open up those tight corners of your hip capsule. We'll switch it. Usually like to spend more time in each position, but for our video's sake, we're going to accelerate it. So you can go to the other foot. Here, pin that foot, let that knee just fall out. All right. So that'll be our warm-up. Like to spend more time in that position, like I said, but we're going to move on to the air squat sequence. So to start out, what we're going to do is begin with the foot setup. And our foot width should be just under our shoulders, about shoulder width. Some people may be a little wider. It's going to vary depending on mobility, depending on body style. And we don't want them overly wide and probably not incredibly narrow either, just shoulder width apart. And we want to try to keep our feet as straight as possible. Most people need about 15 to 30, no more than 30 degrees of toes out. So if y'all have that beautiful foot set up. And we're thinking ground up. So throughout the duration of the movement, we're going to try to keep our shins as vertical as possible. We're going to be pressing through our heel to the front of our ankle, that area. We do not want to press through the front of our foot. Our knee's going to come forward, just really load that patella in a bad way. It's a great way to get injured. So we want to think pressing through front ankle to heel in that area. So if our foot's set up, we're pressing through our heels. And also as we set up, we're presupposing that our athletes already have an understanding of midline stability. So throughout the movement, they're not going to be kidney beans this way. They're not going to be kidney beans this way, around the back, overextended, pelvis. So we're going to maintain the integrity of our midline throughout the entire movement. And as we set up, we have our feet, 15, maybe 30 degrees. What we want to do with our shoulders is externally rotate them, arms out front, so that we can maintain a stable T-spine, so that when we squat, we're not really reaching out, don't have a stable T-spine. That's a nice rounded back, another great way to get injured. So externally rotate those shoulders. And as we descend into the bottom of the bucket, we want to think setting our hamstrings back. Sometimes we say set your butt back, but what that can cause some athletes to do is to have their first movement as just an immediate pelvic overextension. And then they're out of position from the very beginning of the movement. So we want to think about loading our hamstrings by setting our hamstrings back and maintaining that tension throughout the duration of the movement. And as we descend, all right, let's go for it. So we have our feet, everything set, external rotation of those shoulders. And as we descend, load those hamstrings and track our knees out over our toes. We're not going to collapse into a valgus fault. That's a textbook way to tear an ACL right there. So we want to avoid that position at all costs. And our movement standards that Reese has very nicely here is hip crease below the top of the kneecap. Let's say if you're not squatting hip crease below kneecap, you might as well not squat at all. So we have hip crease below the kneecap. That's beautiful. Weight is perfectly distributed. Nice flat back. His T-spine is not rounded. His pelvis isn't tucked under him. Then we have Megan over here. Great flat back. Hip crease. Could be a little lower, but that could just be a mobility or stability issue, which we can fix pretty quickly. Yeah, there she's getting that little drop into the bucket. All right, now y'all welcome to stand up. So let's go through the movement. and I will watch y'all as y'all do so. Load those hamstrings. Bottom of the bucket, hip crease below the knee. All right, and what we just saw, Megan, she corrected it. You can stand up, Megan. But as she would, let's try it again.
Okay.
As she descended in the bottom of the bucket, we saw that knee collapse a little bit into that valgus fault. Now she corrected it, which is good. But like I said, that's a great way to shred those soft tissues of your knee. The arch is collapsing, and that is just not a stable position. We want the knees out, which is indicative of external rotation of the hips, which is the stable hip position. So let's go through it one more time. Drop. Load those hamstrings. Fight it, Megan. There you go, Reese. Good job. Now with Reese, the only thing I would see, his shoulders are a little forward, not as stable as they could be, but he still has a pretty flat back, so I wouldn't make a huge deal about that. We have Megan over here. She's already gotten better. Try to shove those knees out just a little more. Yeah, there you go. Okay, a couple other faults that we want to look for, which neither of our athletes are committing right now. Y'all may stand up. Would be well, that overextension, as I first discussed, which can look like this at the top of the bucket, and the bottom of the bucket. We might have an athlete who's really straining, trying to get up, and collapsing into that lumbar, just really compressing those vertebrae. Great way to injure your back. But then we don't want to trade one fault for another. The opposite fault would be what we call a lumbar reversal, or a butt wing fault, which usually occurs when our athletes have trouble getting into the bottom depth. And that looks like this. We're going, may hit a wall, and then my butt just links right there. There to there. And then when they come up, they'll bring it back, but you do not want to have that lumbar reversal or butt wing fault. Never okay. And neither of our athletes were committing that fault. Thank goodness, but that is something that we want to look out for. So let's just do it one more time. Let's all do it together. Give us a good air squat. Load those hamstrings. External rotation of the shoulders. Vertical shins, pressure the heels. Shoving knees out. Let's hit it. And up. Beautiful.